Welcome everyone to today, June 27th on a Thursday, 2024, CAPC office hours, weekly meeting on behalf of Cluster API and SIG Cluster Lifecycle. Real quick, we abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct, so thank you in advance for being kind to one another, using the raise hands feature to talk, and we welcome all voices. John, welcome. I don't recognize you, but that could be my fault. At the beginning of the meetings, we typically welcome new members and give open mic time to introduce yourself and maybe say anything you'd like about why you're here, why you're interested in CAPC. I'll pause now if you want to take advantage of that. No pressure.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm John Hickson. I work for Red Hat. I am interested in dual load balancer support in CAPZ. So that's and there's lots of other things we'd like to get in as well. So anyway, I'm responsible for a lot of it. So I'd like to start attending these meetings and start talking to you guys.
Okay, great. Sounds wonderful. Welcome. Let me bust open the agenda doc real quick and I'll screen share it so we can. All right, let's see. All right, let me scroll down. Okay, so we don't have, I see an empty agenda, which kind of tracks. Normally we have a few more folks in the meeting. It's summer. People are, for good reasons, taking a step away. Do you want to talk about, you want to take the floor, John, and talk about dual load balancers?
Sure. I thought I added it. Maybe I have an old outdated copy of the doc or something.
Oh, we may have, typically someone copies and pastes. It's all right. Go if you want to go ahead. I'll be happy to take notes.
Okay. Well, so I work on the OpenShift installer team, and in OpenShift we use two load balancers. We use a private an internal load balancer and an external load balancer, each of which load balances to the internal API and external API. And right now, CAPC only supports a single load balancer. And currently, I've devised a very hackish way to get OpenShift to work the way we want it. So I wanted to talk about an approach to accomplish what we need. And I've looked at a couple different methods, and this is why I'm here, because I don't want to just go and just change everything. So I've considered making the API load balancer build an array of load balancers, or just adding an additional build for additional load balancers. So that's where I wanted to start, was with that, and what y'all think about that.
Right. I wonder if does this have intersection with any cluster API primitives, or can we do this just in the provider code?
This is just in the provider code.
Okay, great. So
as far as I'm aware, anyway.
That allows us more freedom. So maybe it would help me if I had. Do you have anything you can screen share? Otherwise, I can open up a VS Code of the source for CAPZ, and maybe you can drive me through some of the things you're discussing.
Sure.
But we also are super welcoming in terms of giving feedback on early PRs in a work in progress form, or even a draft form. You don't have to think that things have to be the way they're going to end up before submitting them as a PR, and that can be a super effective way of collaborating as well.
Okay. All right, yeah, so I'm a little unprepared because I don't know how this meeting normally operates, so I apologize.
That's okay, and I put you on the spot because no one else came, so you're in the fire hose, which is fine. All right, let me see. Share. I'm going to share another screen. Okay, cool. Let me know if you can now see a VS Code window with some shell script in it.
Yep, I see it.
Okay, cool. I'm going to close all this so we can have a clean slate. And I don't think I have anything there I need to save. So I'm checked out on more or less latest main. I assume that's good enough for the purposes of this. So your mention of an array versus a couple of API server resources as A/B choice. Should I maybe drill down into the APIs and we can look at the actual specs and walk through what an array looks like?
Yep.
All right, cool. Is this
Yeah.
under
I think it's type. I think it's under types .go.
Azure cluster types?
Or maybe that's it. Here, I will go to.
Yeah, it's not under this here. Probably under control plane endpoint. Okay. Is if I found the right spot under Azure cluster spec, control plane endpoint? Oh, you're muted, John. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm going to find my branch right now. I haven't looked at this in a minute, so I will. Okay, the path is API v1 beta types.go.
Cool. All right, here we are. It's a big one.
Okay, so yeah, there you
API
are.
server LB right
So,
here.
yep.
All right, great. This looks safer. This one, what I was pulling up, I was thinking, I think this might violate a contract, but we're under network specs. Let's go see where this is called, where this is injected here. Where do we refer to network spec in this spec? Is this under here?
I think it's under the top level one is a cluster spec.
Yeah, that sounds okay. And the network spec is defined by us. Okay, so cool. Let's walk through this. I'm probably not going to be 100% confident. Willie, I don't know if you can be in terms of if there are any cluster API provider contract violations by changing this, but we can let's just walk through it and then we can maybe cluster API meets weekly as well on Wednesdays. So we could probably encourage you to go there and just make sure if this is copacetic within their ideas of how providers fulfill the core CAPI contract. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, I didn't realize there were contracts, so that's the first thing that I know now.
Okay, cool. So API server LB is the configuration for the control plane load balancer. So I'm going to pull up this load balancer spec type definition. Or is one of the core ideas that this itself would become an array? So the API server LB would become an array of these. Is that one option?
Yeah, that's one of the ways I've considered.
Okay, cool.
However, it's quite intrusive because I did that, over the course of a couple of days a while back, and that's why I came here, because I don't want it's a whole lot of work and changes a whole lot of things, and I didn't want to just blast a big PR at you guys, and plus I don't even know if that's the right approach. So the other option is
you did the smart thing, I think. Okay, cool. All right, so now we're in here. So let's assume we're not in that path. What's the other path that might mutate this a little bit in an
The other
evolutionary way?
option is adding just another field, like extra load balancers, something like that approach, or extra load balancer, because I don't know people's use cases. I know this is a generic provider, but I mean, I can't envision people using more than an external and internal load balancer, but maybe there's all sorts of other options. So, but for our needs, just adding one more additional load balancer, so adding a field for that would work for us as well. So I can make the API load balancer internal, and an additional one would be external.
Go ahead, Willie.
Yeah, I don't know too much about like load balancing, but I know that like usually when we add like an additional field, it's like usually like an array, like it could be multiple additional ones. So if it's not too hard, like logically, like I think that would be the best path just for future compatibility. Um, yeah, definitely we don't want to change like the existing field just so it's not a breaking change. So I think like adding another field that's like an array or something like that would probably be the best path forward. Um,
Well, so one
yeah,
thing that occurs to me, thank you, Willie, is that this spec struct wraps, I mean, it's not exactly one to one, but it wraps an Azure load balancer resource. So is John, is your proposal is the way you need to do this on Azure at the infra level? Do you need to create multiple load balancers, or do you need to just have multiple front end IPs representing that load balancer?
Need multiple load balancers.
Right. So I'm not sure that this option is going to work just because we've got, I mean, maybe we can sort of make it work if we assume that these things are common between both of them. But those are, yeah, it gets a little weird. Um, so let me go back up to this again. I know that there were, I recall very um, superficially some conversations in Cluster API about how to have multiple API server endpoints from a Cluster API perspective. So that's at a higher level of abstraction, but that would probably get us where we want to get a little easier with the caveat that it might take longer to get that change into Cluster API. But I've worked with Red Hat before. I know that you folks are super practical ninjas, and so in order to meet your own deadlines, if you had to fork Cluster API for 3 months, I bet you'd consider it.
Actually, I've taken the control plane outbound load balancer and I've finessed it into an external load balancer. So I have a workaround. I just would much prefer to do it, correctly.
Okay, cool. Well, there's a spectrum of correctness. So if we identify like the perfect correctness, if that is a 1 year plan, then that's something that you can consider like, well, that means I have to, we have to ship this temporary solution to customers for a year or so. If we can get less perfect and then start to move that down towards 2, 3 months, then it gets a little bit better for how you might handle the long tail of this. So I think I probably can't offer any more concrete value at this point. I don't know that I can commit right now to being actually Wednesday. Is Wednesday the 4th? What's Wednesday? I'll figure that out. But the next Cluster API meeting, whether it's next week or 2 weeks from now, if you could bring some kind of proposal with, option A, option B, option C, and feel free to bring it from the CAPC side. You don't have to like suddenly spend a week leveling up your Cluster API knowledge. The maintainers there will be able to sort of tie the thread back from the provider implementation into CAPI.
Okay.
And I suspect that there are going to be some interesting conversations around how Cappy should make this easy for folks like you to do. Um, yeah, I think this should be I think this should be an array in some sense where this becomes obviously this should be whoops. Uh, this would be silly, but something like this is the easiest path forward. And I think a very sensible one, like the fact that OpenShift is doing this is because it's has a justification. Go ahead, John.
So the approach that I took, that I have in a branch, the work isn't complete, but I made an additional field called API server load balancers, and I kept that field for backward compatibility, and I tricked all of the getter methods to just go for if the size of the array is a single load balancer, then it will return that. So.
Yep, got it. That would work. I mean, that would be from you're signing up for maintaining that kind of gnarly code that's a little bit non-ideal. So, but that sounds sensible. You could just literally that's right. We add a new field, which is a kind of temporary work on. We check, is this field populated? If so, this is going to take the higher order of precedence, and then you can have a few case switch sentences or if conditions or whatever to deal with. You can sort of infer what the implementation is. But I think that this might be your use case might be appreciated by the Cappy folks in terms of having an excuse for them to revisit this and make this more flexible than having a single endpoint for API server load balancer. Cool. So yeah, marching orders. Let me actually paste it in chat. So cluster API. Okay, so in this anchor here, I'm just going to make a quick note. Okay, so I pasted a link to and you probably already found it anyway, but I pasted it in the agenda notes to the official cluster API community details. So if you could come with some prepared materials to that, I think you'll be even better than you are right now. Cool. And also no worries on the raise hands. All good. Is Red Hat Blue Jeans still? Blue Jeans or die?
No, we're using Google Meet.
Google Meet, yeah, cool. Yeah, the last time I did an interaction, I was at Microsoft and we settled on Blue Jeans. I remember that. It was good. Willie, do you have anything to bring to the agenda?
No, not really.
Okay. Cool. Thanks. It was great to see you, John. Is any other comments while we're here on the OpenShift work? Just chugging along.
I mean, there's little things here and there. Actually, another thing we're working on is we don't want to use NAT gateways for compute nodes by default. So I don't know for certain, but I'm not sure there's a way to disable that at this time. I haven't looked at it because someone else is working on it, but that is something we're going to need to do if it's not currently configurable.
For egress?
Yes.
It should be configurable because I've been on CAPC long enough to remember when that wasn't enabled, when you used the load balancer for egress, which had some certain disadvantages in terms of, at least at the time, if I'm thinking of the same thing, the NAT gateway Azure sort of resource primitive that you bolt onto your VM for egress was more performant, especially at scale. It allowed it didn't violate load balancer like NAT unit thresholds kind of thing. So I think it should be configurable. If I'm talking about the right thing, I think you should be able to turn that off.
Yeah, I agree, and I believe Microsoft's even not going to have that as an option in a year. But right now we have customers. It costs more to have NAT gateways versus not, and so right now we have.
I do recall that.
Don't want that on by default.
Oh, I see. Got it. I do recall that. But you've identified that the egress through a load balancer is on a deprecation path in terms of Azure.
Yes.
I see. Got it. Okay. Cool. Yeah. That's the first I've heard of that. So at some point we would have to address that in CAPC so we don't ship a broken thing. Cool. Yeah. Feel free to open up issues. Hanging out here is probably best. Just FYI, I'm going to probably propose we move this to bi-weekly. So if we do, just because of it's generally lightly attended. It was more heavily attended a few years back. So if we do that, please hit us up on Slack, continuously. We have folks here at Microsoft watching that channel and folks in the community. So
sure. I didn't realize you guys were Microsoft. All right.
Yeah. Well, the two of us are. Not everybody who comes here always is, but okay. Great. I'll upload the recording later on. Without further ado, if no more agenda items, thanks for coming, John. Nice to meet you.
Cheers.
See you online.
Likewise.
See you, Willie.
Yeah.